My name is Simon Testa. My role within the company is I'm Director for School Evaluation. It is a role, mainly, my job is to set up evaluation systems for the different parts of the Beaconhouse Group. And we have started with Pakistan. Hopefully within the first year the system would be up and running and will be coming to your schools by the end of this year. We're starting to come to your schools, obviously not all schools at one go. And hopefully next year we'll be looking at starting discussions with our colleagues in the international schools and developing systems over there. With me I have Samia Rashid. Samia is at the moment General Manager for training up in the northern region, and she has conducted a lot of workshops in schools in the north regarding self-review, and she will have a role in our evaluation division as a senior manager as well, and she will be she's developing a guide to send to all schools and a training program for all schools, so that we will be visiting schools and helping them out in developing systems for self-review. So I'll it's going to be a little bit of a joint presentation, but I'll hand over to Simon.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My role primarily is going to be that I'm going to talk about our context as such and what we've been doing so far regarding self-review. Now, we've gone through some external models of review, and we've gone through our self-review models as well. And we are going to try and draw out what meanings or what messages we can. Because, you know, like what was even said on day one, that it's very important how these theories and all this new information and new ideas fit into our context, what works for us. And so my role is going to be primarily trying to figure out what we have learned from what we've tried out, so that when now we design something with Simon, what he's been working on, that we hopefully will make fewer mistakes. All of you who've gone through the evaluation models know very well that we were quite unhappy with most of what we did, and so there's a lot that we have learned from even the mistakes that we've done, which is what we, you know, a number of speakers have pointed out. The messages that we are going to try and analyze today are linked to these three questions. Why should Beaconhouse have self-review? Why should we do self-review? Why is it important for us? Which strategies do we need to develop and improve? What was it that we were not doing appropriately? How do we need to fix certain things? And then capacity building. Did we not understand what it was, and did we not know how to do it? And then what needs to be done regarding capacity building? We all know that capacity building is related to enhancing the ability of the staff and the organization, and a lot of feedback that we got from heads said that you know, when we were looking at what we finally achieved, it was not visible. And so it became very important that we look at, okay, are we not looking at capacity building the way we need to? I think when we talk about why should Beaconhouse evaluate, I think there's one thing we can definitely say about Beaconhouse, that there's, you know, one thing which is constant about Beaconhouse is constant change. I think all heads are very familiar with this, the number of new initiatives that are, you know, that the school heads receive literally on a 6-monthly basis, and if it doesn't happen, we're literally waiting for it to see, okay, why hasn't something come in from the head office or the regional office, and so on and so forth. Now, according to what Richard was saying, yes, we do not want too many new initiatives, but on the other hand, we have to see that we cannot keep repeating what we are doing, because we're just going to end up with the same thing, and we don't even want that. So Beaconhouse has been very innovative. It has worked on you know, improving the learning process. Once we figured out, okay, how children learn through the training that was delivered, it was very important to then change the curricula. What was it that children were learning, and how was it that children were learning? And then the educational technology. aspect. How does educational technology improve? And the ETAC program started, and then the structural change started with all these innovations that were coming in and all these new ideas that were being launched. Were we being able to implement them the way they needed to be implemented? And I think that's why it's very important for us to do review, because if the company is moving at a pace and in a direction, are the schools moving in the same direction, on the same pace or not? And I think that is something that we might not have looked at very clearly. A lot of times I feel maybe the goals for each school might not be clear. As the company brought in a new initiative, maybe the schools were not taking it on, and sometimes the goals kind of deviated. And we have to understand that as we move forward, the goal also changes, and that was something we need to look at. Now, when we are trying to figure out whether these new initiatives are being implemented in my school or not, I'm trying to figure out what academic standards is the school trying to achieve. If the ETAC program has been launched in my school, is the educational technology that my teachers are using, is it bringing about the academic, is it helping me achieve the academic standards? Is that evidenced in the work? Is it visible in the work or not? The new initiatives that are being launched in schools, is that, being visible in the classroom? Is it happening or not? And if it's not happening, then what needs to be done? Where should I improve? And if I figure out how to improve it, then where does the capacity building come in? Which are the skills that I need to work on? Can I work on those skills myself? Or do I need the school group office, the RO, or maybe the head office? And I think these two aspects were most definitely missed out. We didn't quite understand. I think we were very clear on picking out the areas of development once the evaluations were done. And I think we could most definitely pick out steps that we would want to take. But the problem, I think, came over here. We were not able to figure out how to implement those steps. Now, I'm going to try and take us through an example to make it slightly clearer. This I picked up from a school improvement plan, and I put it up just the way I found it. The objective that the school had, and I think a number of you might have this objective now, was to enhance the English language competency of teachers within the branch. And the steps that they had thought out, now I don't want us to debate whether the steps were appropriate or not, but what I would like you to think as you're reading through the steps is, what would you need to implement these steps? And I'll give you an example. For example, if I look at the last step, classroom observations to collect data on levels used for improving the performance or language competency. How many of my teachers were able to do the classroom observations and understood the criteria clearly and were able to do the observations appropriately? Were they, there's a number of times when we say, well, only the SM has been trained to carry out the observations. Should I be leaving this to the SM only? So if you could just read out these steps, and if you could just give me the ideas, what do you think would be needed if I am to implement these steps appropriately? Anybody? What do you think is needed? Which skills would be needed, G?
I think it should clearly define the role of head and SM and the teachers. The roles should be assigned.
Okay. If I'm assessing the language competency of teachers, which skills would my staff need to be able to implement that step appropriately? Yes. Can they design, can they build assessments, English language assessments?
I think we need to establish some kind of a benchmark first.
Exactly, benchmarks.
Yeah.
How many of us know how to design those benchmarks? How many of us know what language competency is that, is required at class 4 level, class 8 level? Does anybody know that Reader's Digest is written at language competency of class 8? So if we are benchmarking, do we know these things? What else would be needed? Should we use IELTS assessments if I can't design the assessments myself? Then do the IELTS assess academic language appropriately? Which band of IELTS is required?
Because you see, Ms. Samia, I feel that when we are thinking of a benchmark, I would also need to keep in mind the level teachers are teaching at different, for a primary teacher, for a middle school teacher. And secondly, which is suitable and required for their own practice.
Absolutely.
Not really go with IELTS or anything else.
Absolutely. Diagnose the gaps required, which is what benchmarking, what Rifat is talking about. Ensure that the teachers develop a thorough understanding of the language targets required. Do I know what are the language targets for class 1 and 9C? The recent CIE change. The targets, the language target, how has it changed? Everybody knows that the O-level English paper, there's a change in the CIE. The main change is the language target change. Most of our students who were falling on C, on a grade C, are now being put in a band which is failing. So what is the language competency required? And what the point that I'm trying to make, if we can figure out some really good steps that would help us achieve the target, the goal, and we don't have the skills to implement these steps, it's not about to happen. And I think that's what the problem was. It wasn't that we didn't know where the area of development was. And it wasn't that we weren't able to write down these steps, but we couldn't implement those steps. We didn't have the ability to implement those, and we couldn't even at times figure out which ability was needed to be able to implement them. Yeah, please.
Okay. Just on this point of having the capacity to conduct self-review. I'm going to make a comment about something that was said in by one of the speakers in the plenary today, and I have no vested interest in this because I have not been involved in the training of teachers. But we made a comment that, look, untrained teachers are outperforming trained teachers. Now, whether that's true or not is not the issue, but how are we conducting self-review? What are we trying to find out? Is observing 3 teachers, and of each kind good enough? How are we observing them? What